So I'm Jannie Hofmeyr. I'm a biochemist by training originally, but became interested in understanding the sort of behavior of biochemical systems, where we want to understand what happens when you couple all the components of biological systems together to see how they behave and how they're controlled, how they're regulated. So this is what is now called systems biology. But during that time, I realized that the sort of methodology, that the modeling techniques that we were using were not enough to capture the relational structure that we find inside cells, which actually make a cell alive. So cells are alive because they have the capability to produce themselves. So they are systems that will live longer than the lifetimes of their own components. And then I was looking for ways in which I could capture that sort of organizational structure when I discovered the work of Robert Rosen, a theoretical biologist of the last century. And he, with his modeling relation and with his formalism in terms of category theory, showed how you could capture relationships within an organization. And that became a very important way for me to try and understand this idea of self-fabrication, as we call it. And so this is part of what I talked about this morning, is how we could use Rosen's modeling relationship to understand what is now called general complexity, as defined by Edgar Morin, the sort of idea of how things emerge out of the organization of processes inside a system. And then what was important is that that I also discovered in the last few years is the idea that there are certain relations within biological systems that are never captured by restricted complexity. They always out of the equation as soon as you start modeling in terms of dynamical systems theory. And that is the idea of things related to each other by a code. And in the cell, in primitive biological systems, it would be an organic code, where you connect two molecular worlds together by something that recognizes the world on one side and on the other side recognizes the other world, and so establishes a correspondence, like, for instance, the one code that we do all agree on, which is the genetic code. And Marcello Barbieri, who I now collaborate with, is the sort of father of the idea that there are many more codes than organic codes, of which many of them which he identified, but which other people are also now identifying. And what comes out of that is, for me, is the most important idea is that we have now a new mechanism for evolution as well. Because in a sense, evolution, selection, natural selection, is a weeding out process. So you create relative novelties which are then tested in the environment. But one cannot explain the real creativity of new possibilities opening up. And what Barbieri showed that this idea of creating a new code opens up a whole space of creative possibilities for evolution to go in other directions. And so each time a new code is introduced, and there are many of them throughout the billions of years of evolution, we now know that every time a new code arises, new possibilities arise. And so things like multicellularity or endosymbiosis or cells talking to each other in a sense and creating communities is all based on the idea of codes that are produced. So I think this idea of code biology, which we are now creating, is a new lens through which we can view biology, which I think is a very exciting departure for us.